All right, so this is data governance. So from this session, I am hoping that you will all learn what data governance is, what it means, what areas it includes, as well as the specific items that you can do as you begin your policy creation, and the difference between data governance policy and then procedures, and why it is important to have a data governance policy and procedures for your organization. So in today's world, we do everything online, from budgeting and banking to earning the money that goes into your bank account, and even learning, communicating, and connecting with others. Students are no different. So this study from Common Sense Media from 2019 compared screen use in teens age 13 to 18 and tweens age 8 to 12. So as you can see, overall screen time for entertainment purposes has increased for both groups since the year 2015. In 2019, their statistics show that teens were spending over 7 hours online every day just for entertainment purposes. So that didn't even take into account the school work they were doing. So now consider the increase in virtual learning due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and imagine how much screen time your average teen gets now in the year 2022. So as schools embrace new technologies and use them to improve educational services and instruction, more time online means more risks and more work to be done to make learning online a safe and secure environment for students. As educators embrace best practices for teaching in the 21st century, we must also embrace best practices to protect student data online. We share a responsibility as educators for student privacy when using online educational resources, because no matter where student records reside, they should always be protected. Before using educational apps or services, it's important to learn about the variety of federal, state, and local laws that impose requirements and restrictions on how student data can be used, and the conditions under which it can be shared with online service providers. So that's what data governance is all about: governing or controlling, regulating, securing, and protecting our data, namely personal data that could be harmful if released to an unauthorized entity. So according to COSN, the Consortium for School Networking, there are 3 areas districts must address: compliance with federal and state laws, local board policy and contracts; harm to the student or the school, for example, through a breach of sensitive data; and perception by the school's stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, the school board, or other legislative representatives. So in order to move from compliance to trust, schools should continue to raise the bar on existing compliance practices with concrete policies and practices to provide appropriate protections for student data. They must also communicate those practices to parents in order to ease their concerns about student data privacy and earn the trust of community stakeholders. So it's no easy task. The policies and practices needed to comply with existing federal and state privacy regulation are complex, and the climate is shifting with new state privacy laws being introduced at record pace. In addition, compliance with regulation is generally considered to be the floor and not the ceiling. To truly protect the privacy and security of student data, educational organizations need to understand what the laws require, how to implement those laws effectively across multiple technologies, and how to align with community expectations regarding data privacy and security in order to best leverage the power of information and technology to support student success. So, in today's educational environment, why is it so important to implement data governance policies and procedures? Would anyone like to unmute and share or put in the chat? We are probably all educators, which tells us if there's an all of the above answer, it's usually the correct one. And in this case, it is. So, we have an increase in all of the technology in education over the last few years, especially. Technology in our online world is constantly changing. That's the beauty and the curse behind technology. We have a responsibility to protect our online data. And data governance is not something usually understood by student, staff, or stakeholders. So that's something that, becomes our responsibility to really be the experts and be able to communicate all of that information to all of our stakeholders. So what does a data governance policy look like? Who needs to be involved? And what are the fundamental practices that schools should have in place to effectively manage data privacy and security responsibilities in a way that protects students, ensures compliance, and engenders trust in the community? According to the U.S. Department of Education's Privacy Technical Assistance Center, PTAC, an effective student privacy program improves the efficiency of district decision-making and operations regarding data collection, disclosure, and use of student data. In addition, a student privacy program should help districts meet legal and ethical requirements for protecting personally identifiable information, or PII, in student education records. It protects students from harm like identity theft, discrimination, or predatory activity. It protects the district from harm like loss of public confidence, administrative burden of investigating a data breach, alienating parents, or any sort of financial loss that can come from a data breach. And it improves the communication and transparency with parents and students about data practices and reassures parents and students about the security of their personal information. So whether you're just getting started with your approach to protecting the privacy of students, or you're looking to improve your practices, a fundamental part of the process should be establishing your own frameworks of behavior around management of student data. So even if something is legally allowed, that does not mean that it will be right for your school system. After all, data governance policies are not required by law, but having one is the best thing for your organization. So as you begin preparing a data governance policy, here are some things that you should have on your to-do list. So first, you want to get your leadership to acknowledge the need for a program. That probably in today's world, it won't be a difficult thing. We see more and more about districts who have been targeted, even state organizations for educators that have been targeted, lots of phishing scams and things like that going on. So it probably will not be difficult to get that message across to your administrators. However, the extent and extreme of the data governance, the need for a data governance policy may be a little trickier. You're going to designate an individual responsible for policies relating to data use and privacy. And that person would be your information security officer or an ISO. You're going to bring the right people to the table. Now consider, that is going to be, you're going to have your data governance committee. So probably people in your technology department, and then, security and that kind of stuff. But then also on a larger scale, you will want to bring people to the table from all across the district. And as you get into the different aspects of your data governance policy, you will want to bring, your whoever manages your finance, if that's an assistant superintendent or a director or whatever, whoever that is. You will want district administrators. You will want manager, your business managers, different people like that, someone from payroll, those different people from all across the district, because we have lots of different types of data in a school district. You're going to determine which policies and procedures are already in place. So here it's important to note that a policy refers to an organization's guiding principles, so data governance in general, but the procedures are the set of steps or an action plan to follow. So for example, your policy will describe the best practices to secure the data, but then you will also work on creating specific procedures to follow in, for example, the event of a data breach. So you will adopt any additional necessary policies and procedures for the use of student data throughout the data lifecycle, including consequences for non-compliance. So this is something that you probably do not have in place because you don't have, if you haven't established a data governance policy, you probably do not have in place, what are the consequences for non-compliance with this? So that would affect students and staff. And then also, anybody that comes in contact with your data. So that could be vendors, it could be, people outside of your organization. So how does that play out? Next, you'll want to train your data users on relevant policies and procedures. So this is, again, where you'll bring more people to the table. We are currently in our district, we're currently in the process of defining all of our trainings and action plans and things like that for our different groups, where we will train, we will train our finance people, we will train our human resources people, and then, principals and office staff will have a higher level of access to data than your average teacher or your average staff member. You'll next want to think about how best to be transparent to parents and to students about the privacy, and then develop a monitoring plan to ensure policies and procedures are being followed. So, right, you put this plan into place and you have this beautiful plan and procedures, but then how are we following it? So there has to be that follow through and that accountability as well. So to begin the conversation with leadership, COSN, or the Consortium for School Networks, has led the creation of 10 student data principles with input from a group of national stakeholders. So COSN also provides a privacy toolkit, and that is a great resource to aid school districts in understanding their compliance requirements, helps them identify and evaluate potential harms, and to plan for effective, transparent communication. So these are all resources from COSN that are very helpful in the creation of your data governance policies and procedures. So now let's take a look at a common example of why and how a data governance policy will help protect your organization and in turn, your staff and students. This is Mr. Williams. He's a third grade teacher. He just found a great new app to help kids with math through games. His students love to play games and the app is free. More and more teachers like Mr. Williams are making use of apps and online services, and many providers offer innovative and helpful content for free. But be wary that something that says that sometimes nothing is free, right? You know that saying. So some apps require the acceptance of terms of service, and a lot of online services are now doing their licensing through click-through acceptance. So that means like you can sign up for something just by clicking a button or, clicking a checkbox that accepts the terms of service. So that, like it or not, is as legally binding as a signature on a contract. So this can lead to potential problems. So terms of services, right? They are long, they're boring, they're full of complicated legal language, but Mr. Williams needs to be fully aware of what he's agreeing to and understand the terms of service. So we may not think of clicking an accept button as the same thing as, signing a contract, but it can be as legally binding. So for those reasons and more, Mr. Williams should talk to the appropriate individuals about the district organization's policies and procedures before signing up for the app. So does this sound familiar, right? We have teachers all the time who find wonderful apps and wonderful resources and things like that. And if they're free, all the better, because teachers do not have, huge pocketbooks and they don't, get a lot of money sometimes to purchase resources for themselves, and they're just trying to find ways to better teach students, right? So they don't think about the terms of service. They don't think about the data privacy with using, a free app. So another quiz question to get some involvement. Click-through acceptance is a quick way to approve an app because apps with these types of acceptance are always safe and secure. Is that true or false? And it is false, right? Because apps and websites that use this type of acceptance on their terms often do it for the exact opposite reason. So their terms may lead to harm. And by getting the user to click through very quickly and easily without even seeing their terms of service, that increases the odds of them, not paying attention and not understanding what they're signing up for. Okay, so we have talked about a lot of things, right? We've talked about data governance, what that means. We talked about why it's important. We talked about specific things that you can do in your organization to kind of get data governance policy in place. And then we looked at a specific example with staff, right? But I want this session to be as meaningful as possible. So now I'm going to open it up for some question and answer. So I'm going to stop sharing and allow anybody to, if you want to unmute and ask a question, if you want to put a question in the chat, I will share the presentation. I'll put a link to the presentation in the chat. And then also this is going to be recorded. And I think that's going to be available for, I believe, 30 days following the conference. Does anyone have any questions, any specific questions, or care to share about what you're currently doing with data governance, why did you come to this session? What were you hoping to learn? Any unanswered questions or anything that you want any feedback on, or? I love conferences because I get the chance to connect with people, but it's hard on Zoom. So feel free to unmute or type something in the chat. All right, well, I'm going to stop recording and I am going to hang out here for